So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Crystal Garcia, and I'm the training coordinator here at TASA. If you need anything related to any of TASA's webinars, please get a hold of me. My email address is cgarcia@tasa.org. Today's webinar is the first in our October series. We have 2 more for this month. We cut down a few because of the holidays and things coming up. So you want to make sure to get signed up for the rest of those webinars. This webinar is being recorded, and participants' cameras will be turned off. We do make our webinars available via our YouTube channel in about 7 to 10 days, pending any technical difficulties with the recording. So I'm super excited to get started with this content. I think this is something that people in the movement have been talking about is how do we shift the focus from the work we're doing for our communities to addressing the work that needs to be done within our organization. So I'm super excited that Legacy Collective could join us today. They have such a unique model and such a unique way of doing that I think all of us can benefit from and learn from. So I'm going to turn it over to our presenters and let them do their thing. So.
Thank you, Crystal. Hi, everyone. Welcome to It's Not Us, It's You. We are the Legacy Collective, and we are all co-directors and co-founders of Legacy Collective. And we're going to start by sharing a little bit about us and who we are. And Stacy's going to kick it off.
Thanks, Annette. Hello, my name is Stacy Stanaway. My pronouns are she, her. To start off, I'm going to give my little disclaimer. I have 5 kids who are all remote learning and living 24/7 at home. So if my camera goes off and I go on mute, you know, my collective co-directors here will jump in at any time to kind of help me out. But just so you know, everything is typically okay, but there is just lots of kids. So my name again is Stacy Stanaway. I bring about 10 years of professional experience at the local, state, and national level, working in the anti-violence movement. I started in direct service, moved on to coalition level work, and now for the last 4 years have been really working hard at getting Legacy Collective kicked off and running. A lot of my experience and expertise is surrounding the intersections of sexual violence and working with people with disabilities, people with substance use disorders. Those intersections are also parts of my own identity. While I only have about 10 years of experience formally working in the movement, I am 35 and have 35 years experience of, you know, complex trauma and other experiences that I've had throughout my life. And then I'm going to move it on to Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Murray. I am also one of the co-directors here at Legacy. I have been an advocate for probably about 10 years as well, both at different states and different levels. We got together quite a few years ago and have really refocused a lot of our work to the workforce of the movement. For myself, I really focus here on like our research development and our deliverable strategies and bringing in a public health framework. I am particularly interested in recruitment and retention of staff and what exactly the complications along those lines are. I am also, by disclaimer, I just had hip surgery. So if it looks like I am sitting in my bed, it is because I am. And if a cat walks across the screen, I am like very limited in redirecting them right now. So I hope they all just look very cute for everyone. And then to Carla.
Hi everyone, I'm Carla Ramirez Tanari, and I've been working in the anti-gender violence field for about 20 years in various states and various advocacy roles, including direct service, program management, coalition work, and in leadership positions. Here at Legacy Collective, I'm also a co-director, and my background and focus here at Legacy is really around advocacy, program management, community engagement, meaning our workforce, activism, and organizational development. And my disclaimer is that I have a household with 4 teenagers, so if I direct my eyesight somewhere else, it's because I'm calling attention to a behavior, FYI. Annette?
Sorry. Okay, so my name is Annette Science, and the background that I bring to it is prevention, education, outreach. I do a lot of trainings, and I also focus a lot on the intersectionality of oppression when it comes to survivors. I am currently living in Texas. We are all scattered throughout the country. Sarah is currently in Iowa. Carla is currently in Nevada, and Stacy is in Washington State. So we are kind of scattered throughout, and just want to make sure that we all kind of come together, and we're all co-directors. So we all have this collective idea of what it is to be together in this work that we do. So today what we're going to do is we're going to validate the experiences that many advocates and preventionists, particularly those who have come from marginalized communities, how they experience their life, their work in our agencies, people of color, and we want to focus on advocates and preventionists or staff, particularly who have feel like they've been pushed out of the movement due to some of the microaggressions or some of the violence that they've occurred in their own agencies. And we're going to do that by 3 ways. We're going to identify the spectrum of health and harm that's found within advocacy and prevention programs. We want to be able to give you some labor rights that are relevant to your own personal situations that may come up. And we're also going to do some safety planning in case you're experiencing any of the intra-agency violence.
Okay, so we also have gotten some feedback while doing this that some of the terms that we use, we want to be very specific about. And so, for example, when we're referring to advocates and preventionists, we're referring to all people in the movement, in the anti-violence movement, in the anti-gender violence movement, whether they are holding a formal position, whether they're in an agency or outside of an agency at this time, knowing that especially this workforce really often goes between agencies. That's part of our retention issue. So we are talking about just anyone in the movement, acknowledging that we are all advocating to end violence and advocating to prevent violence. And so then also what we mean by collective leadership. So this is a collective organization. That means we are non-hierarchical. We're a consensus-based model. As you can see, like it almost looks a little funny to have 4 co-directors, but that's how a non-hierarchical model works. So we are all together in this. There's no tier system. And so it also means even though we each sort of have like a focus or like something that we maybe are keeping extra attention on, all of our decisions are made together, whether that is like a very formal meeting where we are like having agendas and, you know, down to business, or if that's like a quick text message, like, we have an opportunity for this. Is it cool if I go for it? And then we just get like, you know, thumbs up and move on. So yeah, so all of our decisions are made together. And then a new term is what we call intra-agency violence. And this is meant to describe the very unique form of workplace violence that occurs in organizations that operate in the anti-violence movement. We believe that the root cause is inequitable power and control, and most often mimics intimate partner violence.
Thanks, Sarah. So to start us out here today, we have a real brief activity. But just as Sarah was talking about, you know, across our field, we consistently go out into the community and we talk about these power dynamics. But we rarely extend that conversation to our own employment experience or to our own work environments and culture. And so whether we're talking to in the community or to survivors about intimate partner violence, or we're talking amongst ourselves about our work relationships, we can look within our agencies to the way that power is distributed and where power is held, and if that is an equitable distribution or if it's really lopsided. And you can really dive in and start analyzing the way that power is distributed and where it goes. So just real quick, I'd like everybody to take a second and think about their own agency or agencies they've worked for in the past, trying to keep it specific to domestic violence and sexual assault agencies that can show, or let me back up. So drop in the chat box ways that your agency has control over your life. So the second we sign the paperwork and we become staff members of whatever organization we work for, in what ways do they now hold power and control over our own lives? So if you could just drop some of those ideas into the chat box and we'll kind of review them and talk about them a little bit. I see control over my schedule. Yes, absolutely. Family work balance, remote opportunities, working from home. Absolutely. Grant, vacation time, even our sick leave sometimes. The amount of money we make, control over safety during pandemics. Absolutely. These are really great responses. Salary. Absolutely. Health insurance. Yeah, so we're getting a lot of various accountability reports. We're getting a lot of various answers across a lot of different domains, right? So there's a domain of financial control. And again, we're talking about, we typically have maybe 1 to 2 interviews with an organization. Maybe that goes for an hour or 2 hours. And then after we decide that, yes, we want to accept this offer, and whatever's driving our decision to accept that offer, it can be the passion for the work. It can also be, you know, that we have family that we need the paycheck to raise. So there's a lot of reasons that drive our decision making to join an agency. But the moment we sign that paperwork, the moment that we become an employee of the organization, these levels of control that they possess over us are extreme. So on the screen, we see financial. A lot of people brought that up. If we could, there we go. We got time, the ability to work from home, our healthcare, our credibility is huge, right? So the organization gets to say whether or not our work is good or not. They get to have and speak to that in the community. Our personal safety, a lot of people touched on that, especially right now during COVID-19. We're hearing a lot of feedback from advocates that it's a really rough time in organizations and they're not feeling safe. Career development, access to communities, access to working within their own community. It's a very large and very disproportionate distribution of power within the typical hierarchical agencies that we have.
So there has been some research out there. There hasn't been a whole lot of research. The research that's been out there has been particularly more recent, and we're starting to see a lot more surveys coming out. I know a lot of people have been reaching out to us saying that they're getting a lot of questions, a lot of survey monkeys about how people of color are experiencing, having experiences within their own organization. So here is some research that we have also seen. Many of y'all may have already seen this research, but it's really good. You don't have to take our word for it. So the first one is a sexual assault demonstrative initiative, which is an amazing report that was done. The original intention of this was to find out if dual agencies were able to really provide enough sexual assault services when it came to, or was it domestic violence services really being the one that was focused on. And so what they found over this, during this report, was that both survivors of domestic and sexual violence were being left through the cracks. A lot of the times they were not seeing the people that they that reflected their own ideas and values, or or culture in their own agencies. To be honest, a lot of the agencies that they were looking at was based on white leadership. And so a lot of people of color felt like they were being pushed out. A lot of people from the LGBTQIA plus felt like they were being pushed out, or people with disabilities. So a lot of the times you see the turnover rate really high on those parts. The other report that we saw, particularly for Texas, is the Voices report. I know TASA and TCFV provided a lot of input to this one. This one's out of the Institute of Domestic and Sexual Violence from the University of Texas. And another factor that they pointed out here was that, again, turnover rate was really high. We see how many years in the field that they've been, although it didn't really go into how there's going to have to be more of a nuanced look into everything about all the things that they've experienced or why the reasonings that they were leaving. But what they did find out was that a lot of people had experienced some type of microaggression in the agencies that they were working at. And so you can kind of see on this next slide the type of microaggressions that they were receiving at their agencies. And when we are trying to become anti-oppressive organizations based on feminist values, and we're seeing these type of microaggressions play out in our own agencies, what does that say about our movement? What does that say about what we're doing internally? And although we do have a lot of training that go on, we're supposed to be culturally competent, we're still having these issues within our own agencies. And a lot of times people are saying, you know, don't be so sensitive, don't be so, the same way they would victim blame a lot of survivors in our movement. It's not us, it isn't us. It's the structure that we've created for our movement that has made this occur. And so we really want to take a deeper dive into that and looking at some more research that we can do to kind of dissect it all and try to pull it apart. So on our next slide, we've gone to several places around the country when we were doing some coalition work, talking to advocates, even in our own agencies that we're currently working at. And we've seen that this is a national problem. This isn't just happening in a bubble. It isn't just one agency, it's nationwide. And so what we have coined the term is intra-agency violence is what we're experiencing. And Sarah's going to talk to a little bit about it, about what it is that we're actually seeing in the fields.
Yes, so this is an example of some of the dynamics and mechanisms that we are also seeing. There is a tiny bit of research that has been done specifically about this, and it's not just for workplaces, but specifically the anti-violence workforce. That's it. We want to really specify about that. These issues are not, they impact other workplaces outside of the sexual assault and domestic violence, anti-violence movement, but we're interested in how exactly they're playing out in that workforce. There's a couple of reasons why we believe too that they need its own special attention. And a big piece of that is being a part of the movement is one of the best things, most reliable things we can offer to survivors for their own opportunities for recovery and resiliency. And so if people, especially survivors, are being pushed out of our movement, then that is a unique, different piece than every other workplace. And so this is from Debbie Duthie out of Queensland, Australia. She's one of the few researchers who has forwarded this work, and in her dissertation, she describes how, also in Australia, domestic violence organizations often look like domestic violence relationships inside of their organizations. And so here are some of the examples of different domains of mechanisms of violence. And so we hear quite a few things. I'll just highlight a couple. So for example, isolation is a really common mechanism of violence. So one example is that we have heard that if one staff person receives support from another staff person, so this person was having a hard time and they went to a peer for support. If it is known to maybe a supervisor who is enacting intra-agency violence, the consequences go to the person who provided support. And so now this person who received support feels often badly that the person that they reached out to got in trouble, they don't return to them for support. They don't go to their supervisor for support because it wasn't safe in the first place. And this person is also like kind of left in the dark and in a difficult position to tell, do they reach out for support? Do they not? Exactly how to do that. Another very difficult to define and lock down and prove, similarly in intimate partner violence relationships, gaslighting is an extremely common tactic that we are seeing in unhealthy and abusive workplaces. So yes, yeah, that's just like a little overview of the ways in which that there are mechanisms for it. We are looking into developing this as much as we can. And so for us, we are saying like to our movement, dear movement, your power and control is showing that it's not us, it's not every person who is experiencing violence's fault. It's the conditions of our movement that have allowed this to happen. And so we're going to move into just a very quick glance at intra-agency violence risk factors and protective factors. The following graphics are not an assessment. They might look like an assessment, but they are really meant to only give a broad view of some very specific frameworks that we think most impact intra-agency violence at this time. It's not an assessment tool. Assessments would take a lot more than 3 brief slides to go over, but it's meant to start to build the scaffolding, the platform of understanding how this particular kind of violence operates.
So the first thing that we want to take a look at is our own organizational foundation. When the movement first started, we rose out of conscious raising groups. So it was a collective to begin with. We were creating and making decisions together as women who were, experiencing this violence. We all came together and said, this isn't okay. What are we going to do about it? So they were already doing a collective. As time went on, we started to see our movement be co-opted. A lot of times it was, we needed to get money. We needed to make sure that we had the clout in order to provide services and to get that grant funding. And so we see this hierarchical decision-making process happen. And that's where you start to see a real division of power and control, because now you have a hierarchy set up. It already instills in agencies a power and control differential. So there's already that included, and that does not create for a very healthy. However, you can still have some hierarchical decision-making and be okay as long as you have input coming from some committees or work groups that have influenced the decision-making process. What we are trying to do now is doing collective decision-making. How are we making these decisions together? The way that our agency has been created is we all 4 are co-directors because we were all founded together. We saw the need for it. We came together and said, we need to be able to help others who are experiencing some of the violence that we're seeing out there. And so we also have our board of directors who sit, and we also have a community advisory board, and all 3 of us are able to hold each other accountable. So there is no hierarchy included within our organization. I'm not saying that in order to have a green light type of organization, you have to be a collective, but this is just one way that we see it being possible for agencies to provide or create a more preventative action to be able to have a more equitable organization.
Now, the other thing that we're going to take a look at is turnover and longevity. This is the length of time we are in a relationship with an organization. Now, this is consistently a marker that we see in various reports coming out of our movement. The Sadie, Voices, and a few others identify high turnover rates as an indicator or sign and symptom that an organization or your relationship with that organization may be unhealthy or abusive. The other thing that they identify is those that stay in an organization between 2 to 5 years may have some structure of a healthy organization, and it could be that folks are leaving these organizations to pursue other avenues of career development or education. We also see indicators in these reports identifying long-term commitment or long-term relationships with an organization as something that creates a healthy organization. However, here at Legacy Collective, diving deeper into all of these reports and hearing and speaking to advocates and preventionists in this field, we realize that this is actually a little more complex. And so what this means is that just like the indicator that someone is unable to retain or stay in an organization more than 2 years could be an indicator that is unhealthy or abusive organization, the same holds true for those that are staying in a position for a very long time. So maybe an advocate position keeps having high turnover, and that is an indicator of a red light organization. Or someone is in the same position for 5, 10, 15, sometimes 25 years. And that too contributes to unhealthy relationship with an organization. Now, we do want to say that we're not saying here that all organizations are unhealthy and that there are no healthy organizations in the field. There are healthy organizations and organizations where you can thrive and do the work. However, as advocates in this field, we focus on those relationships that are unhealthy and or abusive. So we want to hear from those organizations that are thriving so that you can help us inform of what structures and what supports need to exist in order for this work and advocates and preventionists in this field to do the work in a real focused, supportive, and compassionate way.
Okay. And one of the last areas that we want to bring special attention to this afternoon is about organizational action plans addressing microaggressions. And so some things that we are seeing in particularly unhealthy organizations is if there is no plan to address the microaggressions that exist in their organization, usually there can actually also be just like actual like resistance to making a plan. So not just a lack of plan, but actively avoiding making a plan. And that the work is put on to the staff people who are experiencing the microaggressions to directly deal with it between staff people. So the organization, whether that's like leadership or whether that's boards or whether that's just policy, inherited policy, things like that, the organization is not becoming involved in the ways that microaggressions are allowed to thrive within this organization's ecosystem. And so then in more yellow light organizations, something that we are seeing is the practice of what we're calling appeasement plans. So that's maybe there's an external or an internal pressure to for the organization to take a look at things that are happening, but there's not really a long-term commitment to it. So you can see that it's kind of when these things ebb and flow. So there's an external or an internal reason for the issue to come to the forefront again, and it might stay there for a little while, and then it gets pushed back for a bit until there's a reason to bring it forward. And for the most part, it's meant to appease rather than make sustainable change. And then in a green light organization, microaggressions are part of a comprehensive plan. Resources are dedicated, time is consistently dedicated to it. It is understood that the external work the organization does is permanently connected to its ability to do this internal work itself. Yes. And so, yeah, that's one of our last domains for today.
Okay, so I just want to call attention that I realize that some people are saying that they cannot hear me. And so if the majority of you can hear me, if you can help me out, that would be fantastic in the chat. And I'll also shout out to my co-directors to keep us in line. But if someone can just give me an idea of the majority of folks able to hear me or not, that would be helpful. I'm trying a couple other things to help improve that, but and I'm also moving closer to the mic. So hopefully that is helpful. And if it doesn't, please let me know. So we have been sharing a lot of information with you, and now we want to hear from you. We are dropping a link to a survey in our chat box. We would like to invite you to follow that link and answer the questions on the survey. The survey is 4 questions and is mostly multi, sorry, it is, but it's multi, it's a very simple survey. So it is confidential. We're not asking any demographic information or any identifying information. Really, what we're trying to get at here is just to hear from you. What are your experiences so that we can better shape the rest of our conversation today? If you're having issues with the chat, please let us know. Sorry, with the survey, please let us know. We will take a 5-minute break and come back at 12:37. In the meantime, I will try to figure out this audio issue.
And Sarah, I cannot put it into the chat. For some reason, right now, my tablet is not letting me do it. If you could please drop that into the chat for them.
You got it.
Thank you.
Sarah, I think you.
Wait. Sorry, I put in the responses link. Is this the correct? This should be the correct one. We didn't practice this. We practiced it with Annette.
Yeah, my tablet started freaking out on me, so I wasn't able to get that link in there, and then it deleted it. So sorry about that, guys.
Okay, great. One person has responded, so it is working. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we have about 1 more minute and then we're gonna call you all back. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for spending the time to answer these questions. Please continue to finish answering those questions and we will get started and share with you a little bit more about who we are. Here at Legacy Collective, we are an independent cooperative organization of survivors, allies, and accomplices within the anti-gender violence movement, focused on improving the experiences of the anti-violence workforce and therefore the experiences of the survivors whom we serve across the nation. Legacy Collective was born out of an effort to move from talking about and listening to the stories of harm within our organization to intervention and prevention of harm in our organizations. Legacy is a way to move from having conversations about it to doing something about the harm we're experiencing. And Annette is going to go over with you about some of the services that we offer.
So for the Legacy Collective, we provide services to organizations. If they want us to be able to find ways to help them create better policies, they can definitely shoot us some policy looking. If they want to do any type of specific training, we do intra-agency violence prevention workshops and trainings for that. Anti-oppression organizational assessments, where we take a deep dive look into how your organization truly is. Is it anti-oppressive? Does it meet the values that you provided us and the mission statement? Does it align with a lot of our own values, as opposed to just providing those values to outside of your agency? We also provide Know Your Rights training for employment. We also do help you create an implementation plan. So that way, once we have completely given you an assessment of your organization, you're able to put that plan into place and making sure that your agency does become more equitable. And we provide various other consulting services. And this really is to create an organization or an agency that has more protective factors in order to prevent this type of violence from occurring at your agency. We also do a lot of direct service to clients, either the advocates and preventionists who are in the field. We provide them support. We make sure that there's crisis intervention. We provide safety planning. We let them know about their labor rights, and we provide any referrals to any law enforcement or legal advice that they may be seeking out. We provide peer support and advocacy, and we also give them some more education on the interagency violence. We also dive a little bit deeper into wanting to find out more about the violence that has been occurring. And so we're constantly trying to get more research, looking into how can we really identify, and like we said, to kind of dive in more to those researchers that have already been doing the work, but trying to give a more complete, comprehensive look at what's been going on.
And before we move on to the survey results, one, I think, important part, I don't think I heard Annette say it, so if I'm repeating, I'm sorry, that we operate on the social enterprise model. So that means that for any consulting fees that an organization does, that we do charge for, it goes directly into the direct services that we provide. So it's also something that's a little different from a lot of other organizations, is that this is not just a consulting organization, that we are providing direct service. And so any fees, any money that comes in from organizations, especially organizations that are causing harm, the goal is then for that to go in to support the people who are experiencing the harm. Yeah, and then the survey results. Yes, I want to do that. Okay, which screen? You guys see the results, correct? Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you for 40 people answering. That's a lot, and so I really appreciate it. Being asked time and time again, some of these questions I know is kind of draining, so thank you to those who felt up to answering. Yes, so, and any of my peers want to jump in about looking at these results with us, but so as we can see, looking at this, the majority is needing to advocate for myself or others, or at least advocating for ourselves. There's a few people who have not felt the need to do that, and a couple who maybe have not felt safe doing it at all. That's really interesting. It's always, that's every time we do this and we see it, it's interesting, and it looks this way commonly, that there's a majority that are in needing to advocate and only a handful who haven't come across that yet. So situations. This was also really interesting for this one. This is kind of all over the place, with some of the largest being issues with leadership, power and control in an organization, accessing resources and support for survivors, issues with human resources or policies, experiencing discrimination in the workplace, and policy changes.
I do want to point out there in that area is that, you know, there's 68% of the responses identified, you know, with being fired or being threatened to lose their position. And so that speaks to that power and control in the organization. And so this, you know, these responses are very validating, but are sadly validating and infuriating. So if you need to step away or you need to take care of yourself, please do so, because some of this information can be really hard to see in this way.
The next batch of, have you felt or identify experiencing any of the following types of discrimination? Yes. So the largest categories here would be ageism, sexism, experiencing domestic violence, sexual violence or intimate partner violence, racial discrimination, colorism in an organization, with a couple that did not get marked on this one. Yes, so it's also, I think this is interesting since even the ones that are not like the majority of an experience, some of these like are just really stark, especially for our kinds of organizations. So like anyone experiencing pregnancy discrimination in an anti-sexual violence organization, which normally we have like grants to support pregnant and parenting survivors, is an interesting and additional like insult, especially to the people who are experiencing these kinds of things, that you might be experiencing the very thing that you are funded and your position is you're supposed to be trying to undo in an entire community, you know. And so have you ever thought about leaving the anti-violence movement due to negative experiences at your place of employment? This is interesting. It seems relatively consistent. It's often about a 50-50 split so far in the limited data that we have for this. But that is really interesting. That's 50% of people are feeling like they can stay, and 50% feel like they can't. And so, especially when we're talking about long-term institutional knowledge and how that's passed on, that's not necessarily a great way to meet our 7 years that we need to be a competent advocate, and it limits a whole bunch of other opportunities. You know, we know that clear and mentorship is a clear benefit and really important for the longevity of new staff. And so if it's a 50-50 chance that people might be able to continue in the field, that really does also limit what our workforce development opportunities are going to be in the future. And a positive question about what brings what brings you or keeps you in the movement? Yes, we have a lot of really great answers. That people love what they do, and that's something that we really want to also like emphasize, is that like people are here for a reason most of the time. You know, that people really care about it. They enjoy their work. They feel passionately about it. Sometimes, not always, and we don't want to say that too. That like you don't always have to have the biggest passion or drive every single moment, every single time in your career. Often our relationship with our work can also have an ebb and flow sort of feeling to it. But most people are talking about wanting to stay and wanting to be here. And for people who don't want to, it's an interesting way to also think about like, how can we support people who are not feeling it anymore? You know, there can be positive ways of also, you know, moving forward into new opportunities. So thank you everyone for answering these questions.
I also want to recognize the fact that a lot of times we are so passionate about the work that we do, that we love the work that we do. We know the need, and oftentimes we don't want to take away from survivors, right? And because of that, a lot of times we minimize what we are experiencing. And because it creates an atmosphere that allows this to continue to happen. And it becomes a cycle. And so we stay silent because we don't want to take away any services from anybody if somebody's being harmful, or and so it does create another dynamic for the fact that we do have so much passion for the work that we do. And I just want to acknowledge that to a lot of people who have may have experienced that.
Thank you, Annette. Okay, so back to you, Carla.
Okay, are you able to see my screen? Nope. Now? All right. The lovely world of virtual life. So what we'd like to do now is move into our second part of this conversation, advocacy and action. For the rest of this conversation, what we really want to do is provide you tools and options for you to create a more balanced power structure where you as advocates and preventionists can support your mental, physical, social, and economic health. Based on the information that we are seeing and what we're sharing with you today, and the responses that you gave to us, most of the dynamics that are most commonly associated with intra-agency violence directly intersect with labor rights. That means that we are all experiencing something that by law we should not be experiencing. Moving into our slides and our support from Stacy, we want to just say that we are not attorneys, and this is not legal advice. This is general common knowledge information around the many ways that there are already federal and state protections for some of these experiences that we are having across our movement. So please do not take this as advice. This is information that many of you should have access to in your own organizations. Labor rights are posted in your break room, if your organization has a break room, or anywhere associated within your HR department, if there is an HR department. Regardless of that, you should have access to all this information because it is general information for everyone to have.
Awesome. Thank you, Carla. So yes, so while I'm just kind of leading off with what Carla said, you know, again, I mentioned it in the beginning, a huge goal and an area of passion for myself for Legacy is to expand our legal area and really have staff attorneys. I'm currently studying for the LSAT. Part of what's amazing about a collective organization is we want everybody to grow and we want everybody to be able to reach their potential, go out in the community, expand their knowledge. So I'm going to be going to law school for the next 5 to 6 years, but my intention is to bring that back to Legacy Collective and be a staff attorney for Legacy Collective. So for this portion, the next few slides, what we're really going to ask you to do is it's a lot of information. We are not going to dive into the details of the laws that we're going to be showing on your screen. But what we would like you to do is take a screenshot, or if you have a phone that you could take a picture of your computer screen, that would be great. Because what we really want to do here is bring more of a balance to that disproportionate power distribution that we're seeing within our agencies. So what I talked about in the very beginning about all those ways that our organizations have control over our livelihood and our own lives, what we want to do is if we begin to experience discrimination, if we begin to experience oppression or other abuses in our own organization, that we have the legal advocacy skills and knowledge to fight back. And maybe fight back isn't the right term, but to balance it out so that we can open those conversations within our organizations and create sustainable change for those that come into our organization after we are gone. So the first slide here, take a picture of it, please. We know that federally there are 7 protected classes. So on this screen, you're seeing a few of those. What I really want to point out here, and to lead off with what Carla said earlier, that we're seeing a lot of intersections, right? So we've had a lot of conversations across the nation within this field about various oppression and abuses and discrimination that we experience within our own organizations. But what we're finding through our work with Legacy Collective is that a lot of those experiences overlap or intersect with federal protected laws and classes. And so this is a really good slide. I'd really like everybody to take a picture of this. Even if these don't apply to you, this is something that you can put in your advocate, toolbox that we talk about, and pull out for a fellow employee, for yourself, for a survivor that's experienced this in their workplace. It's more information for you to hold on to. Now on the next slide, again, it goes a little bit deeper. So please take a picture of this one as well. And if we think back to the survey results that we just took, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of intersections with what people in our audience today have experienced with what I'm seeing on the screen. So we're looking at the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the American with Disabilities Act, the Equal Pay Act, and so really taking our advocacy skills one step further and applying those to our own lives and diving a little bit into our own, increasing our own knowledge on how we can be protected by these laws is a very powerful thing to do. I'm a very action-oriented person. When there's a wrong thing that happens in front of me, the first thing I go to is a policy book, the law, any and every kind of in writing on paper thing that exists that gives us a solid baseline to move forward from. Now, what we just talked about was the federally protected classes. So again, there are 7 federally protected classes. What's really great about some states is they expand those to other communities and other people that have other identities that are outside those federally protected classes. So for example, I am in Washington State. I live right now currently in beautiful Bellingham, Washington, right by the gorgeous ocean, kind of. It's a bay, but it's somewhere by the ocean. And so what's really special about Washington State is we have some protections that take it a step further. So for example, we recently passed a ban the box law. And so what that means is that employers do not have the right to ask about criminal convictions or arrest history at all until it is determined that that person is eligible for that hire or for that position. So what we were seeing before, even within our own agencies, where we know that there are intersections of, you know, survivors that experience abuse, the one of the most common responses to that is to develop substance use disorders. There's huge intersections between those two communities. We go into, my son's gonna pop in to the camera behind me. We go into, you know, organizations and jails, and we talk to survivors, and we work with them and help them understand these connections to their lives, yet we discriminate against them and won't allow people with substance use disorders to work for our own agencies unless they've been clean. I've also seen other agencies, domestic violence and sexual assault agencies, that have banned survivors from working there, that have said, if you're a domestic violence survivor within the last 5 years, you cannot work here. That just, it blows my mind. And so luckily our state laws cover some of those gaps that the federal law maybe won't cover. Federal law will always trump state law, but the state law fills in those holes. And so please take a picture of this screen as well. What's really important about this information on the National Labor Relations Act is that, here, I'm gonna have somebody else. Carla, can you pick this one up? Thanks, sorry.
Thanks, Stacy. So the employee rights under the National Labor Relations Act, really what this means is that we have the right to organize. This movement has deep roots in organizing, and we have come very far from our original roots of community organizing to a structure that allows power and balance. This law provides us the opportunity to return to those roots of organizing. For example, you know, discussing your wages and benefits and other terms and conditions of your employment with your peers or an organization is not against the law. Although organizations would like for you and encourage you not to share the information, it's usually done because to avoid any discrepancies that come to light. So if an organization has a policy that says you cannot talk about your wages with anybody else, they're in violation of this protection. And so that for just to highlight that we have the opportunity as well to meet with others within our organization or outside of organization to improve the conditions of our workplace. That is also protected. And speaking to Stacy's point earlier and to Sarah's point earlier about isolation, because we have this right, organizations do their best to separate those that are moving together to put some energy and effort to improve the workplace. And so this is protected. You are under federal law able to meet together at any time to discuss how you will organize and collectively bargain with an organization to improve your conditions in your organization. Sarah?
Thank you, Carla. This is me. Yes, and so to lead off that point, we do want to touch just real briefly on retaliation. We know that based on, like, if we choose to organize within our organization or as a whole, as a movement, there's a lot of talks about union creation and organizing around that. We have legally protected rights to do that, and we are also legally protected against retaliation. However, we do know, working in this field as advocates, that retaliation happens. It's in your face, it's over, it's covert, it's subtle. It happens on a spectrum across the board. So it is a very real thing. And one of the services that we do provide at Legacy Collective is safety planning around this. So, you know, it's very important, you know, that before you dive into a lot of these assessments or a lot of these steps towards improving your working conditions, that you do, make a clear assessment of the risks and the potential retaliation that could come, and safety plan around that. And Carla will talk a little bit more about that as we move forward, and how you go about doing that.
Thanks, Stacey. So what we're talking about here is defensive employment. Now, I just want to point out here that a lot of the conversations that we're having, seem a little disconnected at times. But really, what we want to highlight here is that based on all these reports, based on the CEDI, based on voices, based on a bunch of other information that is being shared here, the common denominator of harm that people are experiencing is actually unlawful. It is legally not supposed to be happening. Demoting staff members, pushing them out because they are pregnant, all of those things. Other movements have organized to implement laws to prevent that from happening. And this field really just turns a blind eye to all of that and all of those efforts. And it intersects with these movements. So, from that standpoint, we again are not saying that all organizations are bad and that every experience that we have, we should be responding with some kind of a lawsuit. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that in your own organization, if you are experiencing this type of harm, there are legal protections, and you have the right to move towards a conversation with your organization to improve those conditions. If we actively do not address them with these organizations, all that means is that they can continue causing harm to others, and that ultimately impacts the amount and level and quality of service that we provide to survivors. And so that is what we're saying here. Let's figure out a way to come to the table to have this conversation. And if it is not safe to have this conversation in an organization, then you reach out to other places to provide you support. Sometimes I wish there was some kind of way to identify what level of stars an organization has. We have apps that we could say, oh, this restaurant was fantastic. This tax preparer was phenomenal. And we don't have that for our organization. There should be some kind of mechanism that maybe coalitions or state organizations can help us develop. Maybe it's something that we provide in the future, but to identify which are the organizations that are healthy and which of those organizations that are healthy are willing to support us in helping other organizations to do the same. Experiencing harm in this field shouldn't be a thing that is happening, and we are sorry that it is. But beyond sorry, we want to talk about the ways that we can address them directly. So defensive employment really is just about exploring the options that advocates and preventionists can take to increase their employment protection and reduce the amount of intra-agency violence they are experiencing. It is about case building to protect options. Advocates and preventionists help survivors to case build and explore options every single day. Defensive employment is about moving those skills and applying it to ourselves. Now, this safety planning that we're going to review, that I'm going to review with you today, is really about what an advocate and a preventionist can do to create a safety plan if they are experiencing harm, or a way to plan how to respond when they do experience harm. We know that this is not an organizational safety planning assessment. So if organizations want to learn how to prevent harm from happening in the organizations, give us a call. There's a different set of services provided. This one in particular is for all of you advocates and preventionists in whatever position you hold in this field, to put something in place to help you address the harmful experiences that you're having. So take notes, take a screenshot, and hopefully you can have this and that you don't need it. But if you do, you have it available. Number one, keep a detailed record of events. Any potential unlawful act should be recorded as soon as it happens. Keep a log of the occurrence itself. Include the date, the time, the place, and any possible witnesses. It will go a long way in providing a written record of the harmful experiences in your organization. Include any relevant emails, written notes, text messages, or voice messages that are related to the experience. Keep them in a safe place. It is not against the law to keep any copies of emails or text messages if they directly relate to an unlawful action. One of the things that is super simple is to take out your phone and start a note and write down any information that is relevant. Open a Word doc on your desktop and keep a detailed record of everything that is happening. It is really important for you to start documenting all these experiences. We hear too often that when people come to the table to negotiate a better workplace, they are then met with resistance because there is no evidence that any of this is happening. So the more information you have to present at this conversation, the better you're able to address the real core root causes of that unlawful action. Document your work. This is, I cannot stress this enough. Although retaliation itself is illegal, it is possible, and it is a possible outcome to reporting any discrimination or any unlawful action in your organization, especially if the claim involves someone in an authoritative role. Therefore, it is highly important that those facing workplace discrimination or any unlawful action should document the quality of the work should it come to question. Something that we hear often is, well, she's not a very good advocate anyway. Or, oh, well, actually, she's not meeting, or he is not meeting, or they are not meeting their goals. And so if you're bringing any issues to the table, maybe the issue is you because you're not able to do and produce quality work. So document your evaluations or anything that goes into your employee personnel file. This most effectively illustrates the performance in your workplace and can prevent employee retaliation, such as demotions or firing. Find the policy. This can be accomplished by getting a copy of your employee handbook and thoroughly reading it to ensure that you follow the guidelines when it comes to harassment and discrimination in the workplace. Now, a side note on employee handbooks is find it if your agency has one and if the handbook is up to date. One of the things that we've been seeing here is that sharing your employee handbook to others outside of your agency most often is not an unlawful action. It's not illegal. It's not something that is prohibited. And many organizations that are healthy and transparent actually post their employee handbooks on their websites or anyone else in a public forum. So this is something in particular that we're very curious about. And so, having access to your employee handbook is important. And we would like to know as well what the contents of those employee handbooks are. The focus here is to identify if the policies are helpful or harmful. What policies are helpful and harmful and should be used widely, and what policies are harmful and we should probably get rid of as a whole in every state across the movement. So if at all possible, and if safe to do so, we encourage for you to share that handbook with us so that we can take a look at it and identify ways that we can support others in this policy development. But we also would like to know if you can't share it. If your organization says, sorry, We're not about that life. Don't be sharing our information. We also want to know. That says a lot about transparency and trust that the organization has for everyone else to see what guidelines and what values they hold true in their organization. Gather witnesses. Those who may have witnessed the discrimination or unlawful act, or those who have been mistreated or treated unfairly themselves, can be powerful legal support for a claim, but not just for a claim. This is also important when you're moving towards having a conversation with your organization about what is happening and what people are experiencing in your organization. Now, I will say that people that witness unlawful actions or discrimination are not always going to feel safe and providing an accounting of what occurred. And so for a legal action in particular, just having the names of information and information of those that witnessed that action is important. That doesn't mean that they will be included in any kind of legal claim or anything like that. But the information, should it be needed, will be very important in order to provide you additional legal support if that's a route that you choose to go. Know your rights. As Stacy was saying, there are federal protections that are directly connected to the experiences of harm in this field. So contact agencies, the Labor Rights Board, the EEOC, any other organization that you see fit that may have information to clarify for you what those workplace rights are. You can give us a call, for example, and we can help you understand what local protections, state protections, and federal protections might be correlated to your particular experience. Identify support. Find accomplices at work, in the movement, with Legacy Collective, an attorney, labor rights agencies. Find support. Speaking about these issues can feel very isolating. You don't want to speak to others, or you've been instructed not to speak to others about your experiences. We encourage you to find the safe places where you can have that conversation and be supported thoroughly in your experience, and to help you support any options that you are thinking about. Reach out to us, reach out to anybody. Education around your rights in particular is very important, as well as finding those that are going to be supportive throughout this difficult situation. One of the things that we hear often when we're speaking to advocates and preventions in the field is that it felt good to get it off their chest. It felt good to articulate the many experiences of harm that people have had. And if you just want to share it and not act in any other way, that is also fine. You can give us a call, or you can find someone that is just willing to listen. This experience, these harmful experiences hurt us. And so finding support is very important. Take leave. One of the other options that we support here is if you are under an overwhelming amount of stress or toxic environment, or an organization or relationships within the organization that are harmful and abusive, you can explore the option of taking leave. Sick time if it's available, vacation time if it's available, and even exploring if leave under FMLA would be an option. We have had advocates reach out to us that have received support from their physician in order for them to take medical leave due to the overwhelming amount of stress that it is caused by their organization. That's not always an option for everyone, but it can be. So again, educating yourself on your options will be very important. And as a side note, if we have to take personal leave, medical leave, because the workplace sucks, what does that say about the organization and the movement? personal feelings. Risk assessment. What the maximum amount of risk someone can take varies from person to person. Safety plans can be individual or done as a collective. Not everyone is in a place in their personal life or professional life to take the risk to move forward in addressing some of these conditions in their workplace. I may not want to take a leap and join you at the table and having the discussion with the organization on the many instances of discrimination that we are seeing, because I don't want to get fired. And that is okay. It is okay that everybody understands what level of risk and what energy and what steps they are willing to take or able to take. Self-preservation is a thing. And being able to take care of yourself is really important. And having support from those peers in that team that are seeking to address these issues is also important. So be clear, share with people. Here is the amount of risk that I'm able to take to move this work forward. It is a relay race. Perhaps one person can initiate the support and the conversation, and then someone else can tag in, pass the baton, and put energy. Respect the level of risk that everybody can take. It does not mean that they're not committed to improving working conditions. It just means that for whatever reason, at that point in time, they are unable to move forward with any more risk. These are a lot of pieces to put together, but we found that these items are really important for everyone to explore. Next steps is to follow internal procedures. File an internal complaint if it's safe to do so. If someone is fired because of they're pregnant, if you're experiencing discrimination or ongoing microaggressions, if any of these things are coming up and there's a policy in particular in your employee handbook that tells you a detailed step-by-step way to address those issues, follow that and document every single step of the way. Organizations respond in different ways. A healthy organization will follow those steps and say, oh, we see there's an issue, let's talk about that. And we'll engage in a conversation. Organizations that are not so healthy might say, oh, I don't know, I lost it, I forgot it, we don't have time, various other reasons why filing a complaint may not be a good idea or is not responded in a good manner. The other thing to consider is that it might not be safe to do so. If you do not feel safe bringing a claim forward or bringing these issues forward in your organization, don't do it. Reach out to others to provide some support and guidance about what your options might be. Give us a call, give EEOC a call the Labor Rights Board, call your coalitions for support. Find out what level of risk you can take and how to identify if it's safe to do so moving forward with a claim. These, again, are just options that you can explore. The same way we present options to survivors is the same way that we are presenting options for you. These are not all the options that are available, but they're the ones that are important to understand. By giving us a call or reaching out to us, we can help you craft a very tailored, specific safety plan for you and your peers if you would like. But these are the things that I would suggest, that we suggest, and that many of these sports suggest that you implement in order to stay safe in a harmful situation.
So we have a call to action for you. Here are some things that you can do today to kind of minimize what you're experiencing or what someone you know might be experiencing. Continue to document and safety plan around the harm that you are experiencing. Identify who your support system might be. If this were to happen to you, who would you reach out to? Who do you trust and who can you really find support to lean on? Review your employee handbooks. You should be doing that anyways as soon as you get hired. But you want to really make sure that it's been updated, that you have the most updated version, and that it's not just there to collect dust, as some of us might do. Research any employment laws that you may have in your state, in Texas particularly. Go to the labor board to find out what might be available. You can also contact TASA and TCFB. I know TASA is very interested in this topic and wants to provide support around that. We're all trying to figure out this as we go along, but I definitely know that there is some interest there in TASA. If employees are being mistreated, contact the Workforce Commission to file a complaint. We are here for you. If we're here to lend a voice or lend an ear, a shoulder, anything that you might need, if you want to provide or get your agency involved in trying to become more preventative towards any of these microaggressions, give us a call, have us come out, do an assessment, and then we can try to work with your organization. But we're here for you, we're here for agencies, and we really just want to minimize the violence that people have been experiencing while we're doing the work. We really want to just align our values more with what we say we do for others to ourselves. I can't stress just how important that is, that we provide these services for so many survivors every day. And oftentimes we ourselves are overlooked or silenced in our own agencies. And really just question everything. If you start to question your insanity, yeah, that's real. From gaslighting, we want to make sure that we are, trying to figure out the best way to go about this. And some people might have policies that have been there for years and don't know why they're there. Question why they're there. Why are these relevant? But yeah, there are some things that you can start to do today, even though it may feel like you're isolated. We want you to know that you're not. You are absolutely not alone, and we are here to help you. So thank you today for taking the time to listen to us. We're here. You can contact any of us. You can, if you don't feel comfortable talking to me, maybe you know me or maybe you've seen me around the state of Texas, we are definitely confidential, and the other can definitely help you with any case management if you don't feel comfortable, or you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to any of us. We do have our hotline up and running, and it is available, 1-888-608-3809, or you can contact us by email. We're going to open it up now to the audience for any questions that you might have for us.
I just wanted to hop in and say really quick too, just to highlight, I am definitely one of the people who I rarely paid attention to my employee handbook ever. Most of my career has been I don't even know what it is, and I've never even looked at it. So this is often also, I think, a common experience. You don't look into things until you need them, right? And some of the stuff feels kind of awkward, much like a domestic violence or intimate partner violence relationship, starting to document just because you felt kind of weird so often feels like, am I overreacting? Maybe I misinterpreted. So keeping that in mind too, that's that's part of the way that this operates, that it can be really similar to that, to being no, I'll just wait and see how things go. For myself, it has been kind of a hard lesson to have to learn over and over again, that even though it feels awkward to start documenting, it usually, if I'm thinking about documenting, I should probably just start doing it. So I just wanted to say that if you don't look at your policy guides, it's okay. You can start at any time.
And, I also want to share a final thought as well here, is that, often we say, if we're experiencing all these things, the directive from organizations and for the movement is that we need self-care, right? But you can't self-care your way out of discrimination. You just can't, right? You can't self-care yourself out of being fired or being demoted because of any personal situation. You can't self-care yourself out of some of these things that are unlawful. And we're not saying that this means, you need to move forward with any civil action or anything like that. Moving forward, those things can be difficult. Employment law is a thing that can be very difficult, but it's not impossible. Getting protection orders can be difficult, but it's not impossible. It's the same, values that we, move forward within as advocates, we can also reflect on to ourselves. If it is bad enough, there's something that can be done. If an organization is rampant in racism and sexism and all these other pieces, there is something that could be done. Doesn't mean that it's legal action, but maybe it's looking at your coalitions and asking, how do we identify, or what do we do when we know that organization is causing more harm, not just to survivors, but to those working in the agencies? What do we do when we recognize that? What is our responsibility in this movement to address those organizations that are causing harm? And so that's my final thought, and we welcome any questions you guys might have.
And you're more than welcome to ask us directly if you want to stay anonymous.
Okay, those are questions. I'm not sure who can see. Carla, can you see the questions? No, probably not, right? Okay, yes. Yeah, so one of the first ones is about being on call without pay. That was an example that in this person's organization, they have about 100 on-call hours per month that are unpaid unless they're called. They're salaried employees, doesn't make a difference. That is definitely, I think, a Carla question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, look at your state protections. So many of state protections does address this in particular. California is one of them. And so I would say contact the EEOC or give us a call directly. But in some states, that is unlawful, right? And other things need to be in place in order for you to be on call and not receive pay. So kind of getting some clarity on what needs to exist for that structure to work, both for staff and for an organization under an understanding of, under an agreement, not a requirement. Not to require organizations, not to require staff to just volunteer and be on call and get paid if they take a call, but to have an agreement of what that feels like. If it feels like there's a power imbalance or there's something that needs to shift, maybe the conversation looks different. In one of the organizations that I support currently, for example, we pay a stipend. We are not obligated by law. There is no structure in law that says we have to pay anybody that is on call, but it's just a decent thing to do for the type of work that we're doing. And so if we're really moving towards, being in line with our values of a movement, how can we address that in organizations without having to move to any kind of legal recourse? Can we have a conversation about including that as an ask in for our grant funders or using general funds to pay a stipend? I've seen stipends range from anywhere from $50 for one day to $250 for an on-call 7 days, and then being paid additional hours for hours worked. That is a structure that could happen. And that is a structure that really supports a healthy organization and an opportunity for us to support the well-being of advocates. So give us a call and we can help you figure out how to present that to your organization if you'd like.
Yeah, to just jump off of that a little bit, I think that really, I appreciate you ending with that, Carla, because I think that's really the goal for a lot of these issues, right? Is to really, a lot of our policy books are going to meet, some don't meet the legal standards in our state. A lot of them at least meet the basic legal standards that our state requires. However, because we are working in the anti-gender violence movement, we know the deeper root causes of these issues. We know what happens when the power is imbalanced and we feel the discrimination. We know the health impacts that has on our advocates. We know what it does to families. We see that. And so the goal here is for our agencies to meet a higher standard than the law. We don't want our agencies' policies to just be in a line with the law. We're better than that. We want to move this work forward. We're change makers. And so we should be looking into our agencies and seeing, are our agencies just meeting the standard? Are they not even meeting the standard? Or are we going above and beyond and really, really believing what we're speaking?
Any other questions that I can't see in the
Oh,
chat?
yes, yeah, sorry, there's a couple. Also, do you have a website and social media? Yes, we are developing these things. So yes, yeah, I can include that. There's nothing on our social media at this exact moment, but I can literally post something like this evening to get that started. This is like a grassroots effort. I think that's something that I don't know if we mentioned, but this is an unfunded, totally just grassroots. We're doing this outside of our jobs that we take to like make things happen. So yeah, that's where we are. It's a grassroots beginning organization.
And it's coming out of our pockets. We do have a hotline that is coming out of our own pockets.
But this is our Instagram.
While you're doing that, is there any other questions? I know we're kind of up on time.
Yeah.
There's also, with the question you posed, how do you get an organization to see the harm they're causing when you are at the coalition level, especially if you do not fund them?
Oh, I love this question. I'm also familiar with coalition work. Here's one of the things that can happen in a healthy environment in a coalition. It's just a conversation about the values and the focus of the coalition and how you support non-member and member programs. Again, what is the values of the coalition and what is the values of the movement as a whole, and do they align? One of the things that we've seen before is that coalitions will say, well, that's an HR issue, I don't want to get involved. True to some degree, right? We don't have to get involved in any kind of HR issue. But what is happening in an organization is impacting the level of service that survivors are receiving in your state. It merits a conversation. It merits an opportunity for a coalition to say, hey, that's kind of not cool. Here are the many ways that what you're doing is actually, going against what we're trying to implement in our state. As a coalition, even if you're a member or not, here are the things that we're trying to support our survivors in our state with. And by you exhibiting this behavior, it's actually doing the opposite. And so we're looking at not so much in these conversations, framing it as, you're being harmful to staff, but really what does it look like for these services impacting survivors as a whole? And so it is a good opportunity for coalition staff to come together and say, what type of conversations, one, are we comfortable on having? And what conversations is the coalition staff going to support you having with member programs and non-member programs? It does not have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to be accusatory or any kind of note, but really having a clear conversation of like, hey, this ain't cool, let's talk about it. And if that organization is so harmful that even a conversation is going to lead to something not so great, should we be talking to our funders about what it looks like to fund organizations that are not fantastic and are harmful and are receiving money consistently, but not really providing quality services because they are harmful? We have had questions of EDs, for example, that are racist and that have opposed, moving towards having any kind of identification with the Black Lives Matter movement. Is that who we are as a movement? Is that who we are as a movement, that social justice is no longer important to us? And that it is okay to say, well, you know what? I see that happening like we do in intimate partner violence relationships. We see it happening, but it's not about me. I think a coalition has to have the conversation. When is it about the coalition? And what is the coalition's role in, intervening that type of agency and continuing to provide harmful services?
All right, I think it is just a little after 3:30, so we'll get ready to wrap up here. This has been some great information. I have a stack of notes here on my desk. So I appreciate everybody's time and spending the afternoon with us. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, we have recorded this webinar and we do upload those to the TASA's YouTube channel. You can find this webinar in about 7 to 10 business days and past webinars that are archived there on the website. So if you need anything related to webinars, please don't be afraid to email me, cgarcia@tasa.org. And if there's no other questions, we will finish up for the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Crystal, for having us.
Yes, thanks for spending time with us. This is really good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Minute.